Every video I publish, I say the same thing. I speak, I study, I tinker with 5 languages. Every time I move on without explaining which ones, or what level I actually am at, or how I got there. Today, with this video, I want to fix that. This is not going to be a video in which I perform my fluency to you. This is just an honest version. So I want to talk about the methods that generally work for me, the mistakes I made, and what cost me years of progress, plus the one formula I keep coming back to after more than 2 decades of language learning. And stay with me until the end of the video, because the last language is going to probably be the most surprising one. My name is Laura, not Laura, not Laura, not Laura as I've been called before. I am Italian, and in a world where everyone loves to use the word polyglot, I have spent years refusing to use it for myself. I am a language teacher, I am a language lover, which means that I hold myself at very high standards, and I live permanently with this thing called imposter syndrome. But I think it's time to be honest about my own journey, because the lessons in it and the lessons I want to share in this video are exactly what I teach my students every single day. So let's go through each language one by one, and in the meantime I'm going to have a nice cup of tea. Now, as I said, I'm Italian, and obviously Italian is my first language and the only one I was raised with. The very first 8 years of my life have been spent in Italian. My family is a mix. On one side they spoke only Venetian dialect, so the dialect of the specific region I'm from, which I think could be considered more than just a dialect. It's a distinct regional language with its own phonology and vocabulary and little accents within the same region. My paternal grandfather is the figure I want to spend a moment on, because I do believe that his story matters for everything that comes after. He was technically bilingual in Venetian dialect and Croatian dialect, and that's because his own mother was Croatian. The issue is that he grew up in social and economical conditions that forced him to abandon the language completely. I remember him telling me that his own mother was bullied into having to speak only Italian, only Venetian dialect, and she refused to do so. So as a consequence, he and his own twin brother were bullied into only speaking the dialect of the region. And that's because he used to live in a period of time during which different languages created barriers and not the bridges they build today. By the time he became my nonno, he was 50 years old, and he could not read or write Croatian, even though up until his last day he was convinced he could speak fluent Croatian, as well as Russian and English. But that's a different story. Let's just say that by modern linguistic standards, he was arguably not fully literate, even in Italian. And that's again because he grew up in a world where speaking a different language or a minority language was something to hide and not to celebrate. And yet something passed through him. I am almost sure that every single one of his children, he had 7, and his grandchildren, he had 8, has some kind of deep love for learning, language learning, and a natural curiosity. And I think about that a lot, and it is something that I hold very close to my heart, knowing that this deep love that then became a job for me, something that started as an interest, turned into a passion, and now is my everyday job, knowing that this came all from him, from a person who was not considered to be fully literate. It's something that blows my mind every single day, and I am deeply grateful to my nonno. When my parents had me, they chose to raise me in standard Italian only, so no dialect, no mixing. And that is a decision I understand from the point of view of the parent. At the same time, I grew up understanding the dialect of my region and choosing not to speak it. So now when I do, everyone is making fun of me because I'm not completely fluent. But that decision made by my parents gave me a solid, careful relationship with my mother tongue. And again, it is something else I'm really grateful for. On the other side of my family, my mother's side, my grandparents were much more literate. They loved culture, they loved reading, they loved history, music, and everything in between. They gave me this approach of pure or correct grammar and correct sentence use within the Italian language. The beautiful lesson I now hold close to my heart is that your linguistic history never begins with just you, but it goes further back than you think. My linguistic history began with my grandparents and maybe even with my great-grandparents and the way they raised their own children. And those languages that are silenced or maybe encouraged in some families that actually become part of you and are still somewhere within you, ready to come out in the open or stay hidden inside. Now, when I was 8 years old, one of my aunts fell in love with and married a young man from London. He quickly became my favorite uncle with one small obstacle. He only spoke English, I only spoke Italian. And that's how my relationship with the English language began when I was 8 years old. And looking back, I think that one obstacle was actually the greatest gift of my life. Because of him, and later because of a second aunt who also moved to London, I spent many summers and many months immersed in the English language and the culture. I had constant, real motivation to understand and to be understood by someone I love. And here's the thing, I love to admit now that I'm not ashamed of it anymore. Till I was 18, so for 10 years, I was almost completely silent in English. I was used to absorbing everything I could set my eyes and ears to, but I said almost nothing, terrified of every single potential mistake and being laughed at. I had what I can only now describe as small linguistic traumas. Someone mocked my accent. Someone made fun of me for being from that specific region in Italy. I got into embarrassing moments where I said something while meaning something else, or I used the wrong word and people around me laughed at me. And if you've ever had these experiences, you know what I'm talking about. What actually changed things for me was actually two things happening together. The first one was I started immersing myself into the English language with everything I did. Ever since I was 15, my input outside of school has always been entirely in English. The novels that I read, the TV shows I watched, the podcasts I listened to, everything was in English. And the second thing was actually friendship, real friendship with two real people, two lovely ladies, Ashley and Agnes. In different moments of my life, they were able to appreciate my efforts and they had the patience and warmth that a real friendship should have. And those things let me grow at my own pace. And the lesson from English is one I teach my students every single day. Immersion is not something that comes from the geography or where you are on a map. It does not happen just because you move to another country. Immersion is a daily choice, and you can make that choice with what you consume and with whom you spend your time with, so you can build it wherever you are. And the method is simple. Choose one medium you already love, whether that is series, books, podcasts, music, it's up to you. Switch it entirely to your target language. And you should do it without subtitles as soon as you can. You should make it a habit and not a task, because the more it becomes embedded into your routine, the more it can be beneficial to you. Now, another aunt, my mother's sister this time, had moved to Germany long before I was born. So German, again, another language, came into my life through family as well. And I studied German in middle school. I was actually pretty good at it, and I spent time with my aunt and my cousins in Leipzig in Germany. I also went to an actual German language school over there in the city. And by every standard academic measure, I was doing everything right. I was living in the country for a period of time. I was going to classes. I had family around me who spoke German to me, and I lost the language almost completely. Today, I do not speak German. I sometimes, maybe by mistake, understand some of it, but I do not speak German, and I know why and what happened. First of all, my cousins and I use English or Italian to communicate. Once we became adults, we decided not to use German in our lives and communication between us. But also, I never maintained the language in a meaningful way after those years. And here's what I understand now, because I studied it, that I did not understand then. Going abroad to learn a language is not the same as learning the language. So the physical location is almost irrelevant. If you do not want to build the emotional and cultural connection with that language and with your surroundings. I never watched German films. I never read anything in German. I never looked for German music. I used to listen to Tokyo Tales, but in English. And I never had German friendship. Nothing I did ever made the language feel like mine. And so the lesson from German is uncomfortable but important. And it is that motivation and emotional connection matter much more than just a method. If a language does not feel alive to you, no immersion program will ever save it. And it does not mean that you cannot learn a language you are not passionate about. It means that you need to work harder to find your reasons, your angle, your personal connection to it. Without that connection, even the best learning conditions will not be enough to you. And now, Russian. I started Russian at university, so I was 19 years old. And to this day, I cannot fully understand why I chose Russian. But I can tell you what happened next. The moment Russian entered my life, German left. I completely forgot every single word of German that I could speak up until that point because I needed to make room for the Russian in my life. It's like my brain made the decision without consulting me somehow. And let's be real, at university, Russian was entirely grammar based. So we studied structure, conjugation, cases, everything into the tiniest details, with a lot of theory, a lot of exercises, and no actual communication. So the speaking, the real living part and use of the language actually happened outside of the classroom for me. I spent over 10 years volunteering in Russian-speaking communities, building friendships with people of all ages in Russian without entirely understanding each other, navigating conversations that started simple with the basics and then grew increasingly complex. Surprisingly, Russian became the one language in which my husband and I fell in love with each other and with each other's minds. And that's because it was the language that we shared for a whole section of our lives together and individually. And then 5 years ago, we became parents. And slowly, quietly, almost without noticing, but no, I could notice it, we stopped, and over the last 5 years, I have felt Russian leaving me. Not all at once, but in small pieces, a word I cannot find, a sentence that comes out clumsy, a silence where there used to be communication. And it is a specific kind of grief, losing a language that you love, especially if you worked hard for it. Now, when I see my friends with whom I speak Russian, sometimes they ask me, can you still speak Russian? Because in the meantime, they have learned Italian, and that's become the language we use to communicate. And I have to be honest, it's been 5 years since the last time I felt fluent in Russian, and it varies. Sometimes on a good day, I can say, "Да, я говорю по-русски." But most of the times, with all these languages in my brain, it becomes very difficult for me to be confident and clear in one that I've not been using for the last 5 years. And the lesson from Russian is one I believe most deeply as a teacher and as a language lover. And it is that language learning is not about quantity, it's about consistency over time. The formula I give my students is this: input plus output multiplied by consistency multiplied by time. You do not need, and I do not need 2 hours of Russian every day. I would just need 5 minutes every single day for a couple of years. A podcast on the way to the grocery shop, a text message with a friend, a song. The language just needs to stay alive in small ways or it will find a way to live. And I still speak Russian occasionally. Like I said, with some friends. There's a shop near here where I live that is run by some Eastern European families. And the last time I went, there was an American tourist in who tried to use Spanish to speak Italian to this Russian lady, and I was able to be translator between English and Russian, and the lady was actually pretty impressed with me being able to speak Russian while being Italian, and that was such a great accomplishment after 5 years of not speaking the language or speaking it barely. And it was something. It gave me the strength to go back to listening to some Russian music. And it reminded me that I am still capable of speaking and loving this language. The language is still here somewhere. It's not going to disappear like German did, because I have this deep connection and bond to the language. And it's so important in my life and for my own personality that I know I will never let it die like I did with German. And now there's another language, which is Spanish, which I still do not like, and I learned it against my will. And that is not an exaggeration. Spanish has always felt to me like a language that demands a kind of social energy and expressiveness I found intimidating. It is loud, it is fast, and I know I'm speaking from Italian, I know. But to me, Spanish is warm in a way that felt overwhelming to my introverted side. But I had friends who spoke Spanish, and those friendships pulled me in slowly, stubbornly, until I was understanding and then trying to speak the language within the friend group. And I was always surprised at how much I knew without ever having properly studied the language. I know Italian and Spanish are cousin languages, so they sound similar to most ears, but they do not work with the same grammar. The test came a couple of years ago when I was in Spain with a group of people and none of us spoke or had studied Spanish. But suddenly a language had a job to do and my brain was ready and up to the challenge. So the lesson from Spanish is perhaps the one that most surprises people, which is you can acquire significant competence in a language through social exposure only, without ever opening a textbook if the social motivation is strong enough. I had friends who were ignoring me if I did not speak Spanish to them, and that is the reason why my brain forced itself to learn and practice the language, even though I did not like it and I had no motivation for it. And language acquisition theory has known this for decades. The emotional brain is a powerful engine. And then there is French. The language that I am learning now, the language my whole family is learning together, because in just a couple of weeks we are moving to France. And I want to say this clearly, French has surprised me more than any other language on this list. I had never studied French before, and now we have been learning it through a combination of structured lessons with a teacher, but mostly through daily immersive habits. So small things woven into our family life. And that goes for me, my husband, and our 5-year-old child. And it has been working. But what has surprised me most is something personal and completely unexpected. There are structures in French that are also present in the same Venetian dialect of my region, the very one that my nonno used to speak all the time. There are sounds that I thought were just the way my grandparents spoke, or maybe small quirks of a regional way of talking. And now I hear them in French. And it feels like a circle closing. My nonno, who was never able to keep and enjoy and study and learn all these languages he found himself immersed into, who had to leave one or more than one behind, he somehow left traces of those same languages in the sounds of our family. And now I can hear them again from different directions. And the lesson from French is something I think about often as a teacher. Languages do not exist in isolation. Your linguistic history is a resource that you should start using. The sounds, the structures you absorbed during childhood, even from dialects or minority languages or grandparents speaking at the table in the background, they're all there and they will surprise you. There's actually a 6th language which I'm not going to include into this video, and that's Japanese. I studied Japanese in a very academic way, but I did not create a real connection to it. My one goal was to start using a language journal back again. And for some reason I decided to start doing it with a language I did not know, I had never got close to, and something that was completely different from everything I had tried before. So there it is, 5 or 6 languages, more than 20 years, and the one honest version of it all. And if I had to leave you with one thing, it will be this: language learning is not a performance, it is a relationship. And like in every relationship, it needs time, consistency, emotional investment, patience to survive even the difficult seasons. And you do not have to be a polyglot to have meaningful relationship with a language. You just have to keep showing up. I do not call myself a polyglot. Even now, even with juggling between different languages, I still do not consider myself a polyglot. I consider myself a language lover. And if any of this resonated with you, I would love to hear which languages you speak, and mostly which is your current challenge and your biggest obstacle to overcome. Leave it in the comment below. I would be happy to read it. I will see you in the next one.